On Thursday, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis detailed steps to limit the influence of the Chinese Communist Party in his state. Fears of the CCP have permeated the U.S., with particular attention paid to intellectual property and influencing higher education. DeSantis touted opposition to Confucius Institutes, as well as pushing back on corporations that were too amenable to CCP pressure. DeSantis is currently running for re-election against Democrat Charlie Crist, with a consistent polling lead. He is a potential 2024 Republican presidential contender and has embraced cultural and geopolitical hot-button issues that are of great concern to the Republican base.
The last probably week and a half, we've rolled out some pretty impressive initiatives for the next legislative session. Because of our good stewardship, because we have kept the state open, because we make sure that we respect taxpayers and spend money wisely, Florida has the largest budget surplus in the history of the state by far right now. And we did, in this past legislative session, so the current year, we did $1.2 billion in tax relief, which was the largest tax relief package in the history of the state as well. But what we also understood was, okay, that's good. It's made a difference for people. It'll continue making a difference for people going forward throughout the rest of the fiscal year. But you have this inflation. They always say it's not a big deal, and then you look and you see how expensive everything is, particularly things when you're going to the grocery store. So, and we also understand just when you have getting pinched on energy and on groceries, all these other things, bills, that we want to find a way to relieve the burden any way we can. So we announced, I think it was about 2 weeks ago, we were actually down in South Florida, to say next legislative session, we're going to slash tolls by 50% for all of our commuters in every corner of the state of Florida. That's going to save people hundreds of dollars, and in South Florida, it'll probably save people $1,000 or more, because some of them are paying hundreds of dollars a month just on these tolls. And so to be able to do that, that's going to be over $400 million of toll relief for folks, and I think that that's something that'll make a big, big difference. Then we also, this week, announced we're going to do a big, even more sweeping tax package on top of the toll relief. So we did the things this year. We did no tax on things like for baby supplies, diapers, wipes, all those other stuff, and that's really good for families. We have a 5, a 4, and a 2-year-old. My wife asked me, why didn't you do that in 2019? Your first year as governor would have saved us a lot of money, but honestly, there was the legislature's idea. They did a good job, and I think people are really happy to see that. So what we're going to do for the next round, we're going to make the tax free for all baby items, and we're going to add strollers and cribs as well. And that's going to be permanent. No tax on any of those baby items, because we want families to be able to do well. We're also going to be doing tax-free on things like children's books. We're going to do tax-free on athletic equipment for people under 18. We're going to do a lot of things to really help families weather what we're seeing with Biden inflation. But we also understand, the families are, of course, the parents and the kids, but many families have four-legged friends. So we're doing no tax on pet food for next year, and that's going to make a big difference. So we've been rolling out in dribs and drabs the toll relief, $400+ million. Maybe we'll even do more on there. This package that I announced the other day, $1.1 billion, and we're going to announce more because we understand how important it is. We've got a lot of money in reserve. We understand the economy and what they're doing with raising interest rates. So you think about how it cost to buy a house a year ago. Now it's dramatically more expensive because the interest rates have gone up. That's pinching people, but they're going to keep doing it, and I think they're going to thrust this economy nationwide into a really big recession. Now in Florida, we've done better than the nation as a whole on almost everything. Our unemployment rate's 2.7%. The nation is 3.7%. Anytime people get fed up with the poor governance that we see in so many parts of the country, the place they think to get refuge from is here. We're the place that people people know when things get bad, when they can't keep the streets safe, when they're doing bad education, when they're taxing too much, lockdowns, mandates, you name it, once they've had enough, here's the place where they come. And so we think we'll be able to do better than a lot of these states, but we also are just looking at that. So we've got a lot of money set in reserve, more than we probably would ever need, even if you did see that happen. But we need to provide relief for people, and I think this will be the biggest package that we're able to do. So I'm really, really excited about it. I'm also excited about today's announcement, because if you remember in the most recent legislature with Speaker Sprowls and Simpson, we were able to do in 2021 a package of bills to recognize that we do not want to see malign foreign influence in the state of Florida. And the number one source of that influence, not just in the United States, but really around the world, is the Chinese Communist Party. And what they're able to do economically, culturally, militarily to expand their power. And they have a lot of presence now in our own Western Hemisphere. And you see a lot of leftist governments, Cuba, Venezuela, they welcome in the CCP into our very own hemisphere. We think that that's something that we need to take seriously, and we think that that's something that we need to do what we can in the state of Florida to push back against. And so we are able to enact legislation to combat and improve penalties for corporate espionage, because a lot of times they'll try to steal trade secrets, and they do this all the time, and we need to hold people accountable. But what we also did was sign a bill to combat foreign influence of malign countries, particularly the CCP, in higher education. And that means we did things like ban Confucius Institutes at our higher education establishment. And I would note Miami-Dade College had a Confucius Institute here, and this is really a mechanism for the CCP to expand propaganda in the United States. And so it was a situation here. I became governor. This was before the bill passed, and we had folks. I see we have Marcel and the trustees. This can't happen. I mean, first of all, it's not good anywhere, but why would you want a CCP operation in Miami, of all places, where people understand the malevolence of this ideology? And so I'm happy to say Miami-Dade College, they short-circuited the Confucius Institute even before we had to do the bill. But now that we have the legislation in place, that's going to protect Florida taxpayers from being involved in our state institutions, from being involved in what everyone has acknowledged is just a propaganda operation. So I'm thankful for the legislature to have done that, but I also understand that we need to do more. And if you look at what they're able to do, particularly with the CCP, one of the things they like to do is use technology to advance themselves, and that includes trying to get personal information of Americans. Some of the things that these kids are using, like TikTok, they are amassing a lot of data. I think it's a huge national security risk, the TikTok, that we didn't combat that earlier. And so you're seeing this across the board. So what we're going to be able to do, and if you think about the state, we collect and keep a lot of important records for a variety of purposes. I mean, your driver's license info on schools, just run-of-the-mill things that a government has to do. The last thing we want to see is the CCP getting their mitts onto people's personal information. So what I'm going to do today, I'm going to sign an executive order, or I actually have signed it, and we'll put it out in a second, that to prohibit government entities from procuring technology, commodities, and services from companies owned by, controlled by, or domiciled in foreign countries of concern, which includes China, also includes Iran, Russia, Cuba, and other types of regimes that are hostile to American interests. This will prevent the exposure of Floridians' personal information and technology systems in Florida to foreign entities and bad actors. But what we also understand is, okay, I can do that through executive order. I can have some of the bureaucracy in Florida take this action, but we really need to do much, much more. So we're also going to be proposing new legislation for the next legislative session to prohibit government entities from contracting with companies owned by, controlled by, or domiciled in foreign countries of concern if the contract would provide access to Floridians' personal information, whether the state government has it or not. We want all of your information secured. So this is things like Social Security numbers, it's things like your bank account information, and it's things like your medical records. That should not be in the hands of the Chinese Communist Party. And so we're going to act to make sure that that's the case. You also see around the country things like the CCP or a front group company or something. They'll buy like all this land, farmland and all this other stuff. And you're thinking, how is that in our national interest to be selling all this land? And, you know, they pay a lot more than it's worth, and that's why people are doing it. But from a national security perspective, is that something that we want to see? And a lot of times there'll be companies that will put themselves out as private, but if you peel back the onion a little bit, they're basically controlled by the Chinese government. So we think that that's something that the U.S. as a whole needs to take much more seriously, and what we're going to be doing in Florida is doing that. You also have the CCP buying land near our military installations. Why are they doing that? Well, of course, they want to get intelligence. They want to know what's going on here in the United States. And we have 21 different military branches from every branch of the armed forces here in the state of Florida. And we view that as something that's significant. So we have to be on the lookout for what they're doing. So today we are going to propose legislation to pass a bill to prohibit the purchase of these lands, including lands near military bases, by China and other countries of concern. And yes, there's the danger of having this land misused for intelligence or military purposes, but put that aside. We saw what happened with COVID when almost all this stuff was made in China. Why would you want them to be involved in our own food supply and our supply chain here in the United States? They've got enough power over this throughout the globe, and we need to work more on reshoring a lot of our own manufacturing capacity, working with other countries that are less hostile to us, because China pretty much had us and we were at their mercy about whether we were going to get a lot of these important medical supplies. So I think that this is something that you'll see other states will do. And if you look around the country, just with farmland, as of 2019, foreign persons and entities overall held 2.7% of privately owned agricultural land in this country. In Florida, it was about 5.8%. Now, that is not all countries of concern. I mean, the United Kingdom, for example, has some companies that are involved. But clearly, when you're talking about the CCP and you're talking about countries like that, we need to have some distance there, and we need to have a layer of protection for the people of Florida. We also see how important it is in terms of higher education. We talked about the Confucius Institutes. That was good, but that bill didn't ban the CCP from providing support for higher education institutions. It just said you had to disclose it. But what we've seen, this seems like there's a professor every month that will get indicted for getting money from China. So we don't want to do that. So what we're going to do is prohibit any gift to a higher education institution in Florida from any individual, private entity, or government organization that is domiciled in a foreign country of concern. We have seen instances of supposedly private citizen grad students who come to American universities under false pretenses and then take intellectual property and know-how before going back to China. So we're going to work very hard on this. And we also understand, if you think about China's role in the COVID pandemic, in covering up the origins of the COVID virus, if you look at their role in manufacturing fentanyl and then shipping it to the drug cartels who run it across our southern border, we now have leading cause of death for 18 to 45 is fentanyl overdose in the United States of America. That would not be happening if it weren't for China, and that would not be happening if it weren't for the porous border. So these are really significant issues that impact our community. So I'm happy to continue along this front. I think we've stood strong against this type of ideology in a variety of ways, and this just continues us on that course. And so I'm happy to have some of our friends from the Taiwanese community here because I think they understand the stakes. And there's a lot of times that sometimes people don't necessarily see what all's going on because some of this stuff is behind the curtain a little bit. And I think that they've been very helpful in identifying some pressure points here that we need to take a look at. So, Director General, do you want to come up and say a few words?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.